On today's Transport Evolved, we look at a Gullwing, Mercedes SLS, huge amounts of power, electric prototype, very, very sexy. We examine Tesla's IPO and ask if people are investing or not. V8s are coming back in a big way, and it's not just for power, it's for fuel efficiency. Paris, Shanghai to Paris, in an electric postal van. Do we really need long distance trips like this? And a slightly longer Mitsubishi i-MiEV, which claims to seat 5, except it's not made by Mitsubishi. Coming up next on Transport Evolved. Today's podcast is brought to you by audible.com. Get a free audiobook download at www.audiblepodcast.com/Transport Evolved. Over 75,000 titles to choose from for your iPod or MP3 player. And by listeners like you. We thank you for your kind support. It's time to evolve your transport. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to episode number 5 of Twee. I can't believe I said that. Should we go back? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to episode 5 of Transport Evolved. I don't even know which show I'm doing anymore. For Thursday, 24th of June, 2010. Do you know why I said that at the beginning? It's because I didn't do a live version of Twee yesterday, so I'm a Twee episode short in my head, and I do Twee first and then I do Transport Evolved, and this week I haven't done a live edition of Twee. My name is Nikki Gordon-Bloomfield, and
I'm Mike Boxwell,
and I'm confused. How are you today, Mike?
I'm very well, thank you, very well indeed. Been an exciting week this last week for me with electric vehicles. I've been talking to a couple of different electric vehicle manufacturers and seeing all the sort of stuff they're coming up with, and we'll hear more about that in the show later on in July, which will be exciting.
Because I've got some news.
You have?
I'm a mummy.
Hey, at last, congratulations.
Thank you. You didn't even know I was pregnant, did you? I keep these things hidden. What can I say? I'm proud to announce that my wife and I yesterday were accepted as parents for 2 wonderful little children who are going to become our children through the wonderful world of adoption. And I'm not going to go into their name. I'm not going to mention their names or anything, because I think it's unfair to them to kind of bring them into the public sphere. So lots of people have been asking me on Twitter, and have you got any pictures? Tell us about your children. I'm not going to. Other than they're 2 little girls, and that's all I'm going to say. And they're very sweet, and I'm going to be meeting them for the first time in a week's time. No, 9 days' time. And then sometime in the middle of July, Mike, you're going to be doing, I think, 3 episodes of Transport Evolved on your own.
That's right.
And they're not going to be the usual news-based shows. They're going to be kind of semi-pre-recorded, aren't they? They're going to have a bit of a topic, a bit of a theme.
They are, yeah. We're going to have some theme shows. One of them is going to be on electric car charging infrastructures and all the stuff that goes into that, and talking about some new technology and some future technology, all about that. One of them is going to be with an electric vehicle manufacturer, talking about where they're seeing the industry going, and previewing some stuff, which will hopefully be a world first, which would be great. And the third one, I'm keeping quiet at the moment, but there should be some good stuff coming up.
Oh, is that the one you told me about the other day?
It is.
Oh, good. Okay, well, I'm sworn to secrecy too. But hey, look, what a great show we've got lined up for you today. Lots to talk about. Joining us for the very first time on the show today is a gentleman who is a truck driver by night, and he writes for Autoblog Green during the day. I don't know when he sleeps. Domenick Yoney, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Very good, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's nice to be here on Transport Evolved.
Yeah, and kind of bringing up the the connection between, Transport Evolved and Autoblog Green and, all the different websites and blogs that Mike and I and everybody else visits or writes for or whatever. And I think that's a wonderful thing about the Eco Car Forum is we all kind of end up mucking in together, which I think is really nice. I like that in the Eco Car world. So you're a truck driver.
I am now for the last 10 years on and off, I guess, of different kinds. Right now I'm driving a straight truck with a 16-foot box on the back delivering auto parts.
And what does somebody driving a truck end up? How do you end up with green transport?
That's a good question. I'm not exactly sure how that all happened. I've been somewhat involved with sort of environmental issues of different sorts over the years, and for a long time, I've always liked cars. When I grew up, my dad was a taxi driver, reading Motor Trend and Car and Driver and things like that. And then for a long time, I didn't even have a car. I bicycle and public transport for about 11 years. I lived in a bigger city in Canada. But and I moved down to Florida, and this is the job I could find for a day job. And so
cool. So Domenick, are you a French Canadian?
No, not by birth. No, je peux pas un peu de français si nécessaire.
Better than mine. And a French Canadian, I don't. Canadian French is quite difficult to understand because they speak so quickly, don't they? So
that's right.
Yeah. So where are you originally from?
I was born in Toronto, Canada,
right?
And I grew up in New Brunswick on the East Coast.
Excellent.
And then I lived in Montreal for 11 years.
Excellent. Well, I'm half Canadian, so we have a sort of a shared heritage there. But it was just an
cool,
interesting name, and an interesting accent that I couldn't place, which is why I asked. And I do apologise.
Right.
There's a helicopter going overhead at the moment. I think it's the big Chinooks that they have, the big airplanes that come in from military exercises locally to us, and it doesn't do particularly well on a podcast. It makes the whole room resonate. Anyway, let's go on to the week's news. Let's start with, I guess, what must be the most desirable car on the block this week. Mercedes have given a test drive to German website autobild.de for their prototype Mercedes SLS AMG E-Cell. And it's got not one, not two, not three, but four electric motors. They're not in-wheel motors. They're actually just underneath the chassis. Four-wheel drive, 0 to 60 miles an hour, 62 miles an hour, so 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 3.8 seconds. And long distance speed, it doesn't have the range, but top speed of 200 kilometers an hour. Isn't that incredible? Absolutely incredible. So what do we think of that?
Quite close to Tesla numbers.
Yeah, absolutely.
It does, very similar.
And it's a Gullwing as well.
It looks beautiful. I think it looks better than the Tesla, I have to say.
Yeah.
It's a much bigger car than the Tesla. I sat in one of these, not the fuel cell version, I sat in one of these a couple of years ago when it was being shown to the press. And it's a fabulous car. You feel like you're a multi-millionaire just sitting behind the wheel. And so, yeah, I mean, it definitely ticks all the right boxes in terms of desirability, as it were. And that sort of performance is great. I know when I was driving a Tesla recently, the performance is absolutely staggering because unlike a normal sort of supercar, if you want, you get the performance just by putting the foot on the accelerator. You don't have to sort of mess about with revving the engine and slipping the clutch and all that sort of stuff. You know, an electric car just delivers that performance every time you put your foot on the accelerator. It's fabulous and very addictive. So can we have some more, please?
It's got to be better than the Mercedes smart car, hasn't it? The smart electric drive. I keep going on about it, but
definitely.
I'm not going to go any more about it. But Autoblog Green, did you all like the smart ED Domenick, over at Autoblog Green?
Let's see. Well, I think I'd like to try the one that has the Tesla drivetrain in it.
Yeah, yeah. Which apparently Chelsea Sexton says they don't let out very often, but there is a smart car with a Tesla drivetrain in it, which apparently is the same kind of performance as a Hubisa. Have I said it right? Motorbike engined.
That is insane.
Yeah, the Suzuki Hubisa.
I think it still has some room for. I think the Smart ED still has some room for improvement. I think it's nicer than the gas version. The gas version has. There's been a lot of complaints about the transmission. The gear shifting is supposed to be pretty shoddy, but
let's put it like this: the gas version, it's really good fuel economy. But you need to give it, I think, probably about a week's notice if you want to change gears manually. If you leave it in automatic, which is an option in the UK, it's a great car. I mean, we've got one and we drive it around. But if you do the manual system, you tell it, I want to change gear, and it thinks about it for about a second and then lets you change gear. It's not particularly intuitive to use. But, I mean, it's a nice little vehicle for around town. But let's go back to this SLS AMG E-Cell. Bright yellow, gull-wing doors, very fat in terms of, I mean, it hugs the road. It's a proper sports car. Yours for a cool $250,000.
Yep, that's about right for one of them, though, isn't it? I mean, the AMG petrol version, gasoline version, is that sort of price.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, sounds good.
That's true.
I mean, there's a big market for big, expensive... not a big market. There's definitely a market for big, expensive supercars that are powered by electricity. It's the first step in making electric cars desirable. You're not going to get a desirable sports car at $15,000 yet from an electric car, but when you multiply that figure by 10, yes, you can do something quite special. Okay, Mercedes doubled it, multiplied it by 20, but the principles are still the same. As soon as people like Ferrari and Lamborghini and Mercedes start building these sort of vehicles, people are going to get very excited about electric drive.
A lot of people are sort of saying, "Oh, Mercedes, no, we don't want a sports car." It's funny because there seems to be two sides to electric vehicle advocates. There are those that go, "Yeah, look, this is exactly the kind of car we need to get people excited and to get people interested in electric vehicles." And then there's a side of people that go, "Oh, look, that's just a big fast boys toy. And that's exactly what we don't need because it's not going to get people interested. People are not going to be able to afford it, etc., etc." You know what? I think there is a balance to be drawn between the two. You need affordable cars, but you also need cars that inspire, especially young kids, to get into the industry, to work with these alternative fuel drivetrains. And I think it's just a very beautiful looking car. I mean, putting the motors next to the wheels rather than in the wheels saves a lot of handling issues. Mike, do you want to just kind of explain that a little bit?
I haven't really looked at the detail of the Mercedes system, but the idea of the motors in the wheels or very close to the wheels is to is obviously to keep your weight very low down in the chassis, right, and keep your transmission as clean as possible. Actually, the problem with actually having the motor in the wheel itself is you're increasing the unsprung weight of the vehicle, which doesn't help handling at all. So from what I can make out from the Mercedes system, they've got the best of both worlds. They've got themselves a good handling system because the motor is part of the sprung weight of the vehicle, and they've got the efficiencies of having the motor as close to the wheel as possible.
Yeah, and it works. I think it will work fantastically. Domenick?
I think they still have some room for improvement with this, with the drivetrain itself. We've had a reader tip us off that he believes the electronics, at least, are sourced from Brusa. And I'm going to guess that the motors are, but there's still better motors out there that are just coming online. So the British, there's a couple of British motors that I think are probably superior to these ones. And
okay, I'm gonna ask a question now. What about Tesla? Where does this put Daimler and Tesla? Because up to this point, obviously, there's the Mercedes-Tesla deal where Mercedes are effectively buying into the Tesla stocks of electric transmission and drivetrains and everything else. Why have they not used the Tesla motor for this vehicle?
Well, the Tesla motor, I guess they wanted the all-wheel drive or the four-wheel drive. With the Tesla motor is just one big. It's set up better for just rear-wheel drive.
But presumably that's what the original AMG SLS is. I mean, it's a mid-engined rear-wheel drive car, isn't it?
Front engine.
Is it front engine, that one?
Well,
front engine. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I know in the Smart ED, I think the only thing from Tesla that they're using is really the battery pack. I don't think they're using their control electronics in the Smart ED, as far as I know. I think it's mostly just the battery packs and possibly some of the battery control system. I'm not exactly sure what's included in that package. I'm not sure why they didn't source it. I have to look at the efficiency. We don't know the efficiencies of the AMG version motors that they're using. But even
you've got to remember also this is a prototype car. So I mean, with a prototype car, you've got two choices. You're either saying like, okay, we're building a prototype to put into production, and therefore we're going to use tried and tested technology as far as we can, in which case it would make logical sense to use as much from Tesla as you could. Or you say, right, we're going to push the envelope and do something different, which may or may not get into production, but we're going to try something different just to see what happens. And I think that's very true with electric drivetrains and battery systems and management systems at the moment, because people are learning, and so there's a lot to be said, for doing something different, something which may or may not work, but just to try it out and see what happens. And this car, if it goes into production at all, won't be in production before 2013, which means there's plenty of time, if what they've tried doesn't work, for them to throw it away and put in something different.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay, let's move on. Mike, this is one that you picked up, and it's one from Autoblog Green. V8. Now, why don't you explain it? I'm going to go and cough in a corner somewhere.
You go and have a cough in a corner then. Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, V8 engines, everyone loves them or hates them, depends on your point of view. But if you're a petrol head, then the rumble of a V8 engine really is it's something. For a couple of years now, Top Gear, for instance, have been lamenting the death of the V8 engine because of tighter emissions. As a result, they've been doing some sillier and sillier things to promote V8 engines. If you've been watching Top Gear in the UK, they've built a V8-powered hairdryer, V8-powered food processor, a few other things as well. However, it's good news for the people who like V8s. They're going to be around for a bit longer. General Motors have just invested $893 million to upgrade an engine plant to build a brand new aluminum V8 engine. Ford say they're also committed to V8 engines as well. And the reason for it, they're saying, well, the whole idea with emissions was to have smaller engines and everything else, but they're not necessarily as fuel efficient as originally expected. A big lazy V8 as opposed to a high revving 4 or 6 cylinder.
And that's the big point, isn't it? A V8 will go. I mean, my father-in-law's always said this. He's never got the Japanese school of engines, which is Japanese engines are very, very powerful, high revving engines. You take something like a Honda, and it will rev sometimes as high as 8, 9, 10,000 RPM, which is normally the kind of speeds that you would expect on a motorbike. My motorbike, I think, revs up to 12,000 RPM. So it's that kind of high-end speed that you don't normally expect in a car. But V8s will just sit there and they'll rumble low, very, very low RPM in comparison. Lazy engines, but they will just go and go and go. And one of the advantages of a V8, a larger V8 engine, is that the servicing costs on those are so much lower. I'm sure of it. I mean, I don't have that knowledge, but the engine certainly will go for much longer before they require rebuilding, if they're treated right. So that's really interesting that they're being used now as fuel-efficient engines. Domenick, I mean, big engines, fuel efficiency?
More torque at low RPMs, and they're good for a lot of applications like trucks or the larger SUVs that GM still has, but there's still a lot. They're still going to be around for a while. But the smaller engines are still making, improving by leaps and bounds, like the V6, Mustang V6, I think, the new V6, all kinds of horsepower. I think it's getting 26 miles a gallon. And they just did a lap challenge at a raceway down here, and they managed to get 48.5 miles a gallon out of a V6 in a Mustang, which is pretty impressive.
Wow.
So the V8s...
Wow, that's amazing.
The V8s will be around, but...
I mean, I think that we have to think laterally about, all of these challenges. I mean, and the reasons why Transport Evolved exists is to help you, the listener, learn about all the new types of transport out there and try and find transport that is more ecologically responsible, that's more environmentally sound, that saves you money, that uses less energy to get you from A to B. And, I think people don't think of V8s as being necessarily the way forward, but they could be. Just for certain applications, not for everything, but for certain applications, they might be better than a small engine revving its tits off, as we say in the UK. It's a polite way of putting it.
You say that?
Yes.
You say that?
Well, I do. I don't know, Mike, you don't say that, do you? You're too polite for that.
It has been said.
It has been said. Okay, well, look, we're going to have a bit of a break now, and we are going to talk about our sponsor at audiblepodcast.com. Now, if you like to listen to things while you're in the car, while you're at the gym, while you're walking to work, while you're doing errands or running household jobs, I tend to put my headphones on when I'm working on my car and listen to a podcast or an audio book. Sometimes if I'm out with the dogs and I just want to chill out and not interact with the outside world too much, I whack an audiobook on. Or sometimes, if you're stuck on public transport, great way to listen and learn and be entertained and relax. So our friends over at audiblepodcast.com have come up with a great 14-day, no obligation trial for you all to take part in. And what you do is you go to audiblepodcast.com/TWEEPodcast, and you can sign up for a free 14-day Audible trial. And it's no obligation. At the end of those 14 days, you can cancel it if you want. If you decide not to cancel it, you can go forward to have varying levels of membership, which anything from 1 to 2 free audiobooks per month. Great way of doing things. And of course, audiobooks are quite green as well, because you're not buying something on paper that then has to sit on your shelf. You're buying it as an electronic copy. You can make a CD of it and put it in your car, or you can back it up. Once you bought it, it's yours. It's not like a rental scheme. Once you've got that book, you keep that book as an audio book, as an audio podcast, whatever you want to call it. And Mike, I think you've got a recommendation for our listeners to try out for today.
I have. If you're after a book, the one that I've really enjoyed listening to is one called Free, The Future of a Radical Price by Chris Anderson. Now, everyone I've spoken to has either got the book or the audio cast of it, or they want it. And it really is a cracking book. It's all about the way that everything is, or more and more things are becoming free. From Google and from original marketing promotions through to real genuine stuff that you can actually get for free as a way of doing business. If you want to understand why the electric car industry really is so exciting and why it has the potential to take over the whole industry, read the book, and then you'll start seeing exactly how electric cars could potentially take over the future by becoming free, and what the business model is behind that. So I would definitely recommend that book. It's really, really
and
good.
Who's it by again?
Written, well researched. Chris Anderson. He's the editor of Wired magazine.
Fantastic.
And he's an interesting character, and he writes some fantastic books.
Fantastic. Well, unfortunately, I haven't got an audio sample up in time because I've been a bit ill this week and run off my feet. But do check it out. audiblepodcast.com/Transport Evolved. And we thank the wonderful folks at Audible for their help in sponsoring the show. Right. So onwards and upwards, we have Domenick Yoney with us from Autoblog Green, and we're talking about the latest news in the world of green vehicles. We've had some great stories thus far, but here's one for the geeks among you. I know there's lots of geeks listen to this show. In fact, I was on the Geekcast last night, which was a great show. Had a whale of a time. So thanks to the guys over at the Geekcast for inviting me on. And we were talking about E3, the conference that takes place in America, the entertainments and gaming conference. And there were some interesting games launched this year, one of which caught my eye, or two of which caught my eye. The first one was the Chevrolet Volt. The Chevy Volt is going to be available as a car for you to drive on the Xbox 360. And you don't have to have a steering wheel, and you don't have to have pedals. You just kind of wave your hands in front of the screen, in front of the console. You have to have the Microsoft Kinetic system. And it's the new gaming system that they've launched, and you can test drive this Chevy Volt. And it came out of the left field. I really didn't see that one coming. But further illustrates the whole Leaf is a Mac, Volt is a PC thing that I've been going on for weeks about, and nobody believed me. And then I couldn't have written this. I mean, Apple came out with the Leaf at the Worldwide Developers Conference a couple of weeks ago. They had this demonstration of the iAd with the Nissan Leaf in it, and then Microsoft are putting the Chevy Volt on their game console as one of their first games for the Kinetic system. I think it's just brilliant. Very, very clever. Dominic, what do you think? It's not a great way of testing a car, is it?
I haven't. The physics haven't been. It's not. It's nice to see it around. It's nice to get it out there.
Yeah.
It's a good promotional piece.
Yeah.
It's nice to have fun with, but it's not quite like the real thing. Not unless maybe if you were sitting in it, like a simulator. You
can apparently walk around the car virtually. You can pick up the car and you can turn it around. You can have a look at it. You can, zoom in and look at different bits of it. The whole Kinetic system is a bit of a gimmick at the moment. And I'm saying
it will pick up. I think there's some great opportunities for Kinetic. I was working with a gesture-based system, a computer system, about 15 years ago, and it takes a bit of getting used to. But there's certainly a lot of great potential for that sort of technology. Yeah. Using it for driving a car, not so sure. But actually, now you mentioned it, it's come up with some interesting ideas, because why not in the future have a car that's actually powered that way?
Okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to scoot back here at my studio. I'm going to put my microphone on mute so you don't hear the chair scooching across, and then I'll demonstrate what you have to do to get the Kinetic system to work. So what you do is effectively you're going to be, you've got your hands up like this. If you're listening to the podcast, I'm sorry about this. What you do is you put your hands up in front of you, and you're making gestures like this on the screen as if you've got an imaginary steering wheel in your hand. I don't see that taking off. Not particularly for that side of things. But it's kind of cute. Now, something that did grab my attention at E3 was the PS3, obviously Sony's PlayStation, considered probably one of the more serious gaming platforms alongside the Xbox 360. And there is a particular game that has been around now for some time on the Xbox. The PS3. Mike, did you see it?
No, I didn't. I missed that one.
Okay. It is involving a Tesla. It involves... Have you guessed what it is yet? It involves the Stig.
Gotham Racing.
Sorry? Not Gotham Racing.
Gotham Racing?
No, not Gotham Racing.
Need for Speed 4?
No, not Need for Speed 4.
Involving the Stig. It could be anything.
Well, Top Gear have got an exclusive, which I think is just incredible. Let's just put it like this. It's just a fantastic, fantastic game. It is the game. If anybody wants to, try out racing of any type on cars, Gran Turismo 5.
Ah.
Yeah.
That one.
Gran Turismo 5, which is the racing game if you're onto your consoles. Project Gotham Racing isn't really a real racing game. It's kind of a go around the streets and do silly things. It does have a Tesla in it. I mean, I've got PGR4 for the Xbox 360 for that very reason, because I like the Tesla. And there are times when I race, I know this is really sad, I will have Tesla-only races around the towns and cities that happen to be in the game.
Well, I suppose it's still green because everything's being displayed on recycled electrons.
Yes, and it's wonderful when you do it on a Tesla because there's no noise. So the only noise you get is this wonderful whirring sound, which is just brilliant. But not Forza, Gran Turismo 5 in 3D, they've signed a deal with the BBC, or not BBC, with the people who own the rights to Top Gear, which is a BBC motoring show. I'm sure you've all heard of it, with Jeremy Clarkson and
somebody, and
yeah, Jeff and who else?
Sounds familiar.
Richard Hammond, James May, and the Stig, who has actually been 2 or 3 different racing drivers of over the years. Everyone knows who the Stig actually is, but no one says. And I've
met him a few times. In fact, I raced him.
Yes, yeah, he's a nice chap.
He is.
He's a nice chap.
We never say who he is.
But we never say who he is. And they've got a deal on this, which is fantastic. I mean, they've got access to the game. And if you go to YouTube and you look for Gran Turismo 5 E3 debut trailer, halfway through that, there's a picture of the Top Gear test track with the Stig driving, and they cut to a black or red? I can't remember. Tesla going shooting up the track. So I think, hey, that's good. Sexy cars, sexy green cars have made it into video games. I mean, they were in the previous episode, but it was brilliant. Brilliant. So, what next, Mike? Long distance trips.
Next? Yeah, long distance trips. I know that's one of your one of the things that you really hate is when people take an electric car and say, right, we're going to drive it from one end of the world to the other just to show that you can do it with an electric car. And of course, it all fails because they haven't got the range and all that sort of good stuff. So here's another one, but this one's actually done by an electric car manufacturer, Venturi. They've been building very small numbers of electric vehicles in France for a number of years, and they have been doing a deal. They've done a deal with Citroën to make the Berlingo into an electric vehicle again.
Now, come on, should we explain what the Berlingo is for those in the US who've never seen it?
It's basically a truck, a little van similar to the Ford Transit Connect.
Yeah.
It's similar sort of size to that, and they've had an electric version around since the mid-1990s, but that went out of production about 7 years ago and has now been brought back, updated, converted by Venturi, and they've really done it because the French Postal Service wanted to buy some electric vans, and they bought 250 of them to start off with.
I have a bit of an issue with this, though.
Go on.
I'm sorry, driving from Paris to Shanghai.
Oh, Shanghai to Paris.
Shanghai to Paris. In a Citroën Berlingo. I mean, come on, guys. Couldn't you have chosen a nicer looking vehicle? It does, as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything for the cause of green vehicles. It just makes people go, oh, look, that's another weird looking vehicle that happens to be electric.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the Citroën Berlingo in Europe is a very common car, and nobody's going to look at it and think it's weird. It's, because there's probably about 1 million of them on the roads in Europe.
Yeah, that is true.
So in many ways, it's actually the opposite. This is something which is familiar to people. Oh, it's an electric version. That's interesting, but it's not a weird and wonderful small hand-built car. So for that purpose, I think it's good. The other thing is that Venturi say they're doing it to demonstrate the reliability and endurance of electric vehicles. Well, it does that, certainly.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't know.
And it's getting a lot of attention on the highway. They're saying, a lot of people look at it, and they have some decals as well on the hood so they can show people exactly where they're going, what the route of the trip is. And I kind of like the way the thing looks. You don't really see them over here at all, and so it's just it's kind of nice. One interesting thing about this: the same couple a few years ago, they did the same trip on electric scooters.
Wow.
Oh, right.
This
is Geraldine Gagan, isn't it?
That is devotion to it. And obviously we had the guys. Adventure. We had the guys from Racing Green Endurance on the show last week. We had one of the guys, Alex from Racing Green Endurance, on. They're flying out, I think, today or tomorrow to start their trip from Alaska. Oh, the car's flying out, that's right. And they're flying out in a couple of weeks. And they're going to come and join in on the show. We're going to try and touch base with them once a week on the show and find out how they're doing. Cool. And they're driving from Alaska all the way down to the tip of South America in an electric sports car that they've kind of converted to electric. And it looks a sexy car, and the trip is a little bit more about the young students making the trip rather than people going, this is an electric car and look how far it can go. And I think I feel quite happy that they're doing that trip, because I think it just has a little bit more, I don't know, it has a little bit more adventure to it. A little bit more of that British adventuring spirit to it, rather than just let's drive an electric car a long distance to prove that it's possible. I don't know. I'm going off those. I think maybe Chelsea's been bending my ear too much on that one.
I really like the Racing Green Endurance team thing, and that's actually that's the company. The motors in their car are made by the company. I was thinking that Mercedes should have tried that out. They have more torque. I think the more power, and that same company actually the. Racing Green Endurance teams have been downwound the motor, so they've been depowered a little bit.
That's right.
They're set up for more endurance. But the company has also just finished upgrading their. I guess. I mean, they know more about it than I do, but the company has just mentioned, just had a press release that they've actually boosted the power of those motors, so they're even more powerful than they were, 6 months ago.
Wow. That's pretty impressive. Alrighty, so next story. Chelsea has written a fantastic article. Chelsea Sexton written a fantastic article on Autoblog Green last week about, actually a couple of days ago, about adding sounds to electric vehicles. Now, we had a long chat last week on the show with Chelsea about this, and all I'm going to say is, if you want to read it, go and read it, autobloggreen.com, search for it. Basically, she said, we're losing sight of reason in the debate over electric cars and where things go. Right, X Prize. What's going on in the X Prize, Mike?
I've not really been following this story too much. I have to admit that the whole thing of the X Prize concerns me, actually, in some ways, because they're taking development cars, which prototype cars, and subjecting them to public scrutiny. When actually, when a vehicle's in development, you don't need you don't want all the little flaws with it from appearing, because it actually undermines what a lot of these companies are trying to do.
I'll just say one thing, Mike. No one made them go into the competition.
Yeah, $10 million did.
Well, no. Look, I think the biggest victim of this by far, thus far, or the biggest victims are probably going to be Zap and Aptera, because they're the two companies who've been talking the most about their vehicle, have been bigging their vehicles up so much. There are some teams in there that aren't making vehicles. They're not pretending that they're production-ready vehicles. And while Aptera have made it clear that it is just a prototype, they're going to market pretty quickly after this, and they've had some major flaws with it. So they've knocked some more people out. They've obviously been doing the long distance tests this week, haven't they, Domenick?
Actually, today they're doing the long 90 miles, I think it is.
That's right, yeah.
They're actually, you can watch them live. They have a live stream of the Michigan International Speedway there, and going around the tracks. I'm really enjoying it. There's a lot of different teams, a lot of some innovation, some just great stories involved, and some interesting approaches to the vehicles. They're not all electric vehicles. There's a few different approaches being taken.
There's some very efficient gas cars. Very, very efficient gas cars. I mean, there's lots of different ways you can make a vehicle efficient. You can either change the drivetrain, you can change the design and challenge the design of the vehicle. Because, I mean, let's face it, the concept of a car has remained pretty static over the last century or so. What constitutes a car has not changed all that much. And, you've got these people making, boat tail cars, very, very efficient in terms of cutting through the air. I was reading up about a car the other day, 1930s something. It was a streamlined car that got over 100 miles to the gallon. And I can't think of the name of it now. So if you know it, let me know. It was quite a rare car. I believe it had a V8 as well. Rear engine car. V8.
Oh.
Can't think of the name of it.
Oh.
Answers on a postcard, please. But anyway,
there's a lot of streamlining going on in the 40s.
Yeah, and then we kind
Tatra.
of lost it, and then we all went a bit dodgy, and then we just seem to be making less fuel economy now than we did when we started. In fact, my wife sent me a link last week to a wonderful game roadmap of advances in automotive history, and it started off, the fuel economy back at the turn of the 20th century, and the fuel economy at the start of the 21st century, and fuel economy has dropped. Maybe safety's improved, but fuel economy has dropped, and that's really sad, really, to be honest.
It is. Mind you, what's even more sad is that the train times are longer than they used to be 100 years ago as well. Yeah, in the UK, the train times... a few years ago, there was a big hoo-ha. Somebody found 100-year-old train timetable, and all the times were faster than you can do on the current trains.
Again, probably safety.
The volumes must be up a lot, though. A lot more people.
Now, oh yeah, absolutely. But it's sad to think that speed hasn't improved. The trains go faster, physically go faster, but you don't get there any quicker.
Now there was a story. Carry on.
I was just going to say, but you have a high-speed rail now in Europe as well, like in Japan. The bullet trains.
Not in the UK, but we do in places like France, and I believe Germany has one as well. We're talking about having one in the UK, but we shall see.
I think
it's at least 10%.
I think it will probably. I think it will probably work. There's a piece of news that I've got coming up next, but I'm going to ask Mike to choose one because I've lost it, and I'm going to try and find it while you go on to another story, Mike.
Okie dokie. Well, one that I've been playing with the last week or so. I've been doing some real world testing on electric vehicles, and I'll be doing a lot more over the coming months. Basically, documenting the real world driving conditions and ranges you can expect from different EVs when driven in different ways and different conditions. So there's one which will be, how far you can drive in town, how far when you're doing freeway speeds. So the starting point is a Mitsubishi i-MiEV, and the range is quoted as up to 80 miles. We managed 91 so far in one test in mixed driving that speeds up to about 55 miles an hour, and that's with 4 people in the car. The more recent test we did freeway speeds 67 miles, and we're driving at an average of 65 miles an hour there.
Right.
So we're building up a whole series of these over the next month or so, and we'll be repeating them at different times during the year, so you can see what happens at different temperatures, and then trying different cars out so you can compare them side by side. So instead of saying, well, okay, on the LA4 rating you can get 100 miles, well, what's that actually mean for different people driving in different conditions?
It's funny because I'm doing the Eco Rally this year. I'm one of their guest drivers for it. I'm really looking forward to it. I hope to have a great time. Yeah. Apparently Fifth Gear are going to be there and Top Gear as well, so it should be a fun day. And I'll be there with some cameras as well. We're going to try and do a live stream if we can work it out, because it takes place on a Wednesday. And I've been asked to drive the Citroen EV on the trip, which has a range of 40 miles apparently, which is a bit low. So I'm going to try and see if I can eke it out for 60 odd miles on the trip. But last time I drove the car, we had a bad experience.
Well, so with the Mitsubishi i-MiEV, they say 80 miles range, and say we managed to do 91, which I was quite pleased with. And that was with 4 people in the car. and traveling at speeds of up to 55 miles an hour. So it was all sort of back roads stuff, or driving through towns, and it worked really well. We were keeping up with the rest of the traffic. Certainly wasn't slowing anyone down, but just driving very economically. It is possible to get good mileage.
Mike, how far is it to mine from yours? Must be about 80 miles.
It's about 80 miles, yeah.
So you'll have to come down now in the IMEV.
Absolutely, I haven't got an excuse now.
Yeah,
I'll have to come now.
There's a meeting up tomorrow night in Bristol, in the UK. Electric car meet. So come down, bring the IMEV. There isn't a fast charger, but I'm sure we can sort out some kind of charging.
You have to give me a push back, won't you?
Yes,
but there you go.
We'll have to sort something out. There's a sad story that I just want to say my sympathies to the family of a professor in Germany who unfortunately died this week at the wheel of an electric car. It wasn't any of the vehicles that are on the market today. It was an electric car crash in the Black Forest. It was a replica vintage Siemens electric car, and it doesn't name. I'm just trying to find the name of the chap who died. Doesn't actually say, unfortunately, but it just says he was a university professor. He was out with some of his students in a replica of a 1905 electric car, which apparently had been originally used as a Berlin hotel taxi. And they had been working on restoring it and getting it running. And earlier on in the week, apparently someone had said they thought there was something wrong with the brakes. But unfortunately, the car crashed. 62-year-old driver, the professor, was killed. And some of his students that were there, one of them was injured quite severely. The rest, thankfully, got away without any injuries. It's a real sad day. It was ahead of it was kind of like a scheduled test drive that was in advance. There was going to be a Siemens conference 1905 to 2010, pioneering electric vehicle motors and all of that, because Siemens have been behind electric car motors for a long time. Unfortunately, this vehicle was crashed, and I'm afraid I don't have any more information than that. It was just on the local.de, which is a website in English, but it's a German newspaper. So you have our sympathies there. Let's talk very quickly about donating to the show. We'll have a bit of a break now. So if you are listening to Transport Evolved and you like the show, we would love you to donate. Now, as yet, there is not a donate button up on the website, but as of tomorrow, when the show goes out, there will be. So if you'd like to make a donation to the show, we'd love you to do that, because you can consider it a tip for myself or Mike, or you consider just helping pay towards the running costs of the show, because it does cost time and money to produce this show. So if you'd like to support us and give us a donation, you can. It's completely up to you as to how much you donate. If you'd like to sponsor us, you can get in touch as well at sponsors@transportevolved.com. If you've got a product that you'd like to sponsor on the show, do get in touch. We only have sponsors on the show that we endorse, honestly. So we're not going to just say, yeah, come on over. If we think your product is worth anything, we're happy to talk about it. We like it ourselves, but we're not going to just advertise things willy-nilly. Sorry for those beeping noises in the background. I'm making bread, and my bread maker is making bread-making noises in the background. I just noticed that. But other than that, please support us. And if you don't want to donate, or you aren't able to donate, why not tell the world about Transport Evolved? Because we'd love you to help spread the word. Get over onto iTunes, write a review, or whatever you'd like to do. We'd really, really appreciate it. Now, Mike, let's talk Audi, and I'm going to go and shut my bread maker up.
Okie dokie, no problem. Well, just a little bit of news I picked up this week. Audi showed an A1, which is their new small car, They showed an electric version of that at the Geneva Motor Show this spring. And it was a concept that they were talking about bringing out. Apparently, it's not going into production. There's a document from Audi in Italy which basically says no, it won't appear, which is a shame. Dominic, have you sort of picked up on this story at all?
I saw that it was on Autoblog or Autoblog Green today or yesterday.
That's right.
And it's a shame. It's a nice looking car, but I guess just the way the car is designed, it doesn't lend itself well to a conversion to electric. I'm not really sure. It wasn't, I think, designed originally with that in mind. But it is a sharp looking Audi.
It's a great looking car. I mean, I think they may well have had the same sort of problems that BMW had with the Mini.
Right.
It wasn't designed from a start up as an electric car, and converting a car, especially when it's a small car, from a gasoline model to an electric car, it's never going to be easy. It's going to be difficult to get the balance right, and where do you put the batteries, and so on and so forth. So
there's an interesting thing though. The A3 is basically a Volkswagen Golf, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So are they going to do an electric A3? Because they've obviously got the Blue E-Motion electric Volkswagen now. So any news on that, Dominic?
I haven't. Audi A3. I haven't heard anything about that particular model. There's some smaller Volkswagens that's part of the same group. I think they're looking at an electric up. Audi, they seem to have like the e-tron. It looks like they're going forward with that, and it looks like they'll have maybe a couple models based around that. But it's hard. They make decisions, Audi, and then they change their minds back and forth. They did the same thing with hybrids, bringing them to the States, then they're not bringing them to the States, and it's really hard to until they actually do something. It's hard to predict exactly what's going to happen with them.
It seems really bizarre that Audi are playing this electric car thing very strangely. Obviously, we've had the e-tron, which I think a lot of people still say is a bit weird because they've been quite... the way they've advertised it's been really strange. I can't describe any more than that.
It seems like they're playing with the industry rather than actually taking it seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. Dipping their toes in the water and going, should we, shouldn't we? Yeah. I don't know, will we, won't we? Oh, okay, we'll do it. And I don't think that's the way that they can go through the industry. And all right, let's go on now to, this is a story, Dominic, that you won't have seen, but it's a story that I think Mike and I have seen, and it's a sad story, really, and it's one that I'd hoped we wouldn't be reporting. Now, as you know, BBC's Top Gear does not like electric cars, period. Well, let's put it like this. The production team like to beat up on electric cars, I think is probably the best way of putting it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if the right electric car came along, I mean, the Tesla they liked, but yeah, they couldn't help but make a few jibes at it. But as a car itself, they thought it was fantastic. Right. I think as more exciting cars come along, like the Tesla, then they could be persuaded to change their mind. But it's going to take time.
Well, there's another motoring show in the UK called Fifth Gear, which is on BBC's it's not BBC. It's on Channel 5, which is an independent channel, and they've just come back for a new series. And I think the second or third episode, they looked at the Mitsubishi i-MiEV, and I think they actually drove the car that I drove when I test drove it. How are you going to test drive an i-MiEV? What would you consider to be a sensible thing to do, Dominic, if you're going to test drive an electric car for a motoring show?
Well, the i-MiEV, it doesn't really have a lot of range. Most of the people that have driven it, have really liked it. The interior trim is supposed to be not so great, it's not a luxury vehicle. But you would probably use it for what it's designed to do.
Oh, right.
Drive it around the city, inner city.
Right. Yeah. No, they drove it from London all the way up to the north of England, or the other way around. I can't remember which way around. They did it.
Yeah, Newcastle to London.
Newcastle
about
to London.
350 miles.
So they did a long distance trip in an IMEV, and of course made the usual, oh, we don't have any electricity. There were some really weird things like, oh, well, we can't put the lights on because it's going to drain the batteries, which we've debunked, haven't we, Mike, before?
Yeah, it's a total rubbish, absolute rubbish.
And getting pulled over by the police because they were driving too slowly.
I put the lights on my G-Wiz just out of to prove the point once, and 2 days later I turned them off and the battery was still about half full.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that one's completely debunked. But yeah, I mean it was basically another sort of show where the petrol heads who don't get electric cars, so therefore they they'll look at the weakest point, right, which is the range.
Now, interestingly, they met up with Robert Llewellyn halfway through the trip and gave nearly at the end of the trip, and did a little interview with him at his home, which is fine. And Robert was brilliant, as he always is. He's got a new show coming out called Fully Charged, which you should check out on YouTube. Fully Charged is the name of the show. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant show. I'm hoping that maybe Mike and I can go on it at some point. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink, Robert. I'm sure you listen to this. And we think that everything that Robert does in terms of electric vehicle promotion is spot on. I mean, the guy is really plugged in and switched on now to electric vehicles. And they did this little interview with him. They cut it quite a lot in the final episode, in the final edition. But it just felt, even with that interview in, it just felt like the whole of that process was, well, electric cars aren't any good because they're not going to do long distance trips. So the question is, what does the industry need to do to counteract this? Because on one side, you've got people making long distance trips in electric vehicles to prove that they can make them. And then on the other hand, you're getting journalists, for want of a better description, making long distance trips to prove that electric cars aren't any good. Help.
They need to stress, what the car's
anyone
designed
who
for.
buys an electric car.
Go on, Dominic. Sorry, Mike.
Sorry.
Go on, Dominic.
I was just going to say the manufacturers just need to stress, or in their publicity and their promotion, express what the car is designed for many people, especially the lower range cars like the iMeV, or I think the Leaf is going to be very iMeV range like as well. And it's great, especially a second car, or if you don't do a lot of out of town trips. It's perfect for that. If oil shoots up to $150 a barrel again, it's not going to be as difficult to sell them. But until that happens, they just have to put them in the right context. It's all about the context, really.
Absolutely. Mike, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was now. Oh yeah. I guess most people who are looking at buying an electric car know that they have a range, a maximum range you can do on a charge. Just like your normal petrol car's got a range before you need to refuel that. And it's not going to be an issue if you buy an electric car. You know that you're only going to have a range of 50, 100 miles a day. You're going to buy it knowing that, so therefore you're not even going to try driving from London to Newcastle. Most people who are buying the first generation of electric cars are going to be buying them as second cars, and so that isn't really an issue. If you're a family, you've got 2 cars in a family, then great. You use the electric car where you can use the electric car and use something else when you can't. And the other people who will be buying electric cars are people who don't drive those sort of distances anyway.
Right.
I know several people who never drive more than sort of 40 miles away from home. And I guess if most people thought about it, they've probably all got grandparents or uncles and aunts or neighbours, elderly neighbours, who just use the car to pop to the shops and go and visit their friends 5 miles down the road, and that's all they do. So there's a whole range of people for whom an electric car is fine, and who cares about the range?
Well, as we said a couple of weeks ago, a large proportion of the Japanese people who have reserved the Leaf, the Nissan Leaf, the 2011 Nissan Leaf, are actually baby boomers. They're the OAPs. And it's just a perfectly suited vehicle for them. It's easy to drive. It's got all of the gadgets and luxury. It's got a good level of trim. You can get in and out of them easily. They're easy to park. They've got the gadgets to help you park if you need to. And it's clean. You don't have to worry about doing all of the nasty servicing or anything like that. And they're cheap to run once you've bought them. So quite a lot of older people are buying EVs and buying hybrids and running them. But let's talk about range anxiety, because I wrote an article this week about it, and there's been some interesting comments about range anxiety. I don't think it's going to be a problem for early adopters of electric vehicles. Contrary to what the mainstream media would have you believe. Because
I'd agree.
You're not going to be able, if you live up a mountain in Colorado, in the Rockies, you're not going to be able to buy an EV straight away, because no one's going to want to sell you one. If you live in a desert somewhere in the middle of nowhere, on the Australian outback, you're not going to be able to buy an EV for the foreseeable future. If you live in downtown, wherever it happens to be, whether it's downtown Detroit or New York City or London or or Paris or wherever, and you want to buy an EV, chances are you're going to be able to get one. But it's also the places where you're going to be driving less. There's going to be more charging points available, and so range anxiety really isn't going to be a huge issue. Add to the fact that people who are buying EVs first time round are either the aforementioned older generation who aren't going to be driving that far anyway, or people who are really geeky about this and understand all of the issues, the inherent issues of early adopting. So, I don't think it's going to be an issue for some time. I don't think it's going to be an issue, period, really, to be quite frank.
And the range extended electric vehicles will really help for those people who do have to go, farther than the iMEV or Leaf or whatever else is out there coming in will take them. If they need to go, most of your running around is 40 miles or less a day. My running around this town, 10 miles is about as much as I really have to drive anywhere. If I want to go to the next town, I can still do that with the range of the more available cars coming, but you just have that in mind. You know what your daily patterns are. If you need to go far, you can rent. I mean, I do that already. If I'm going to take a trip, a couple 100 miles or back or whatever, I rent a car anyway, so I don't have to worry about putting that kind of wear and tear on my own vehicle. And I think I wrote a post a while back about that, and I thought it would be a great idea if people like Ford with their new Ford Focus EV or the Leaf, even if they sold with their car they sold a package, like an option package, so many days worth of free rentals, make it an arrangement with the rental company, and have that, pay a couple $100 extra. You have 2 weeks. You have your 2 weeks vacation a year. You can get a gas car and go drive to your heart's content.
That's interesting you said that, Dominic, because in London, that's exactly what the Nice Car Company did, who sold the Mega City car.
Right.
Not the BMW. There was another car called the Mega City before BMW took the name. And they offered, when you bought the car... I'm
familiar with Nice.
You got the Nice Car Club. They were a member of a car club, and you could just borrow a car when you needed it for long distance trips, and it made a huge difference to the sellability of the car. I don't really understand the whole concept of range anxiety anyway. I get fuel gauge anxiety. I don't get range anxiety. Isn't that weird? I trust an electric vehicle to get me there more readily than I do a gas car, because I've had gas cars let me down more than I've had electric cars let me down. It's weird. It's just strange,
My gas gauge doesn't.
There is no doubt.
Work.
Once you got, sorry.
So,
go on.
I was just going to say my gas gauge doesn't work, so I use my odometer to see exactly how far I need to go before I put more fuel in that thing. So if you know how far you have to, before you have to do something about it, you don't really run out of the power you need at one time. I don't know why I've run out of gas. with this like system. And I expect the same would be for electric car, you know.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay.
I'm actually finding something slightly different now because I so rarely use a petrol vehicle. We've got a gasoline vehicle outside, and I've had to use it a few times recently because the other car was being used elsewhere, and I keep forgetting that I need to put more fuel in it, and the fuel gauge gets lower and lower and lower, and I get into the car now and think, I don't know if I've got enough fuel now to get to the local service station, just because I don't, out of the habit of having to go somewhere to buy fuel. I come home, I plug the car in, it's full of fuel. Yeah. It doesn't work with the gasoline engine, so I've actually gone the other way around. I've got range anxiety in a gasoline car because I don't know if I've got enough fuel to get to the fuel station.
Yeah,
there you go.
And I get it. I get it on the motorbike because I don't have a fuel tank on. I don't have a fuel gauge on the motorbike. The only way I know how far I have to open up the fuel tank and kind of peer inside. Which generally it never works because you're wearing sunglasses and a crash helmet, so you're trying to see the reflection of the fuel inside the tank. So I need to get that thing converted to electric. PDQ.
No, every time if you want to check how much fuel is there, if you need a bit of extra light, just use a match and light it up, and you can see.
Okay,
you can peer inside the tank. Yeah, works really well.
Mitsubishi have slashed 30% off the iMEV price.
Ooh, I missed this one. How did you find this one out?
Oh, well, I wrote an article on it earlier on in the week.
Oh, there you go. Show how much I know.
Well, you mentioned Mitsubishi earlier on. I thought, yeah, we should do that. This is only for the Japanese market at the moment, because obviously they haven't yet announced the US or the European pricing finally yet. But in Japan, they've knocked 30% off the price to an equivalent price of, I think it's 28,000.
Okay, so it's now only 60% overpriced.
Yeah, by 2012 it'll be $27,000 equivalent in Japan, which is a much better price range. I mean, it's under the price of the Leaf. At that point, then that makes sense because it's less of a car than the Leaf is. It's less of a car than.
Yeah, it's a smaller car. Absolutely. Yeah.
Smaller car, smaller range, one less seat, much smaller trunk space. It makes sense to have a smaller car. I love the iMEV, and I was really ready to go out and get one until I heard how much they wanted it for it, and I just went, no.
It's a cracking car, but it just isn't worth that amount of money. I mean, we were talking about V8 engines earlier, but for the price you can get that they originally announced for the Mitsubishi iMEV, you could buy a Jaguar V8 engine sports car, and you think V8 engine sports car or Mitsubishi iMEV? I don't think Mitsubishi iMEV will win on that one.
Well, I mean, it would for me because I'll drive anything if it's electric, if it's good.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I certainly wouldn't have the money to spend on it. I couldn't afford that.
Precisely. And one of the other stories of the Mitsubishi actually is.
Go on, Dominic.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I don't think you'd really want to, personally myself, I wouldn't want to spend more than $24,000 for an iMEV, like after whatever rebates. That's really as much for that vehicle as I'd personally really want to spend.
Yeah.
But
and you have to think that the gas version,
I'd buy two, but
the gas version is half of that. The gas version is about $12,000.
That's
right. Equivalent.
That's true.
And, the gas version's a really nice little car. It's fuel efficient. It zips around. They no longer sell them in Europe. They did for a while in Britain. They stopped selling them, Mike. I never really understood why they stopped selling the i in the UK.
They stopped selling it because the electric car was coming along, and they didn't want people to compare the price of the electric car and the gasoline car, which is just what we've done.
I mean, it was £10,000 in the UK for
9,500.
And the i was highly priced. You could buy a Mitsubishi Colt, which is a 5-seat hatchback. For less. It
wasn't. It was more expensive than the Colt, but it was a much more specialist vehicle. For your money, you got yourself an automatic transmission, you got yourself air conditioning, you got quite a high spec vehicle, and so.
And this air of exclusivity as well.
Absolutely.
That feeling that it was an exclusive car.
In the UK, they sold out their yearly allocation every year within the first sort of 6 weeks of the year, and it was popular.
But the iMEV is just much more of a car than the i was. It really is a much better car. It handles better. It goes around corners quicker. Its acceleration is much better.
Quicker.
It's a super little car.
Yeah, I mean, we should make a disclaimer here and say that Mike does have one.
Well, yeah, I know what I'm talking about. I've been driving one for 6 months now.
So Mike is bound to be a little bit knowledgeable on it, but you're not what you would call a you're not completely neutral on the iMove, are you, Mike?
No, it's a good car. What Dominic was saying earlier about some of the plastics on the interior, you're right. It's not an equivalent to an Audi or something like that, but it's as a small city car. If you compare it with the Fiat Panda, which obviously you'll be getting in America next year, then it's comparable to that in terms of size, in terms of build quality, and everything else. It's a perfectly good little car.
And the smart car, it compares quite well to the smart car. And I have to say, absolutely, the smart car trim is not very good. I was driving up to Derby yesterday, and there's a little cover on the end of the indicator stalk, and it fell off. Just fell off. It had cracked over time. The sun had cracked it, and it had just cracked, and it had fallen off. The car's less than a year old. Wow. There's rattles behind me now. In the trim rattles. The air conditioning started making a noise around Christmas. It starts whining. And there's really high pitched whine that the smart car engineers have yet to replicate, which we hear every time we get in the car. Sorry, Dominic.
Sorry, I'd expect better than that from Mercedes.
Yeah, so would I. But Mercedes, let's face it, Mercedes have a really bad attitude towards the smart car, and it's been illustrated to us multiple times. We've gone in the dealership. We went in once to say that, well, okay, we've got a family now. We're getting 2 children, and we'd like to, maybe give the car back and try and sort out something else. And the salesman just looked at us and went, well, you can't afford a new Mercedes, can you? Excuse me? How do you know, A, what our income is? Actually, yes, we could. If we wanted to, we could buy an A-class, but we don't want to, thank you very much. It was just bizarre. But it's that kind of snooty, down-the-nose look at anybody that drives a smart car because, well, you're only buying a smart car because it's the only car you can afford. And it's just, it just left a nasty taste in our mouths,
Not good.
Some people.
Can we talk a little bit about the Mitsubishi?
Go on, Mike.
Sorry, can we talk a little bit about the Mitsuka-like electric car?
Go on.
Well, Mitsuka, that's the one. I like Mitsuka. They're an interesting company. In Japan, this little company called Mitsuka take mass-produced cars and do something a little bit different with them. They make sports cars. They make all sorts of stuff. Sometimes they build up their car from the ground up, and other times they take something from a big manufacturer and just make it different. Back in the 1990s, they took the Nissan Micra, which is a little city car we have in Europe, and they made a version which looked a little bit like a 1960s Jaguar saloon.
In fact, there's one in our town. I see it quite regularly.
Yeah, they're great, aren't they? They're fantastic looking. And they've done sort of things which look like miniature Rolls Royces and some fun, little fun vehicles. And it's great to see a company just doing something different. Well, the latest thing they've done different is they've taken a Mitsubishi iMove and they've made a stretch limo. Not quite massively stretched limo. What they've actually done is they made it 7 inches longer, and they've said it's now a five-seater rather than a 4-seater.
It looks a bit weird, Mike.
It does. They've done something odd to the front, haven't they? That's one thing with Mitsuka. Sometimes they make cracking-looking vehicles, and sometimes they're as pig ugly as you can expect. But the fact they try something different, I like.
Yes.
And they say it's a 5-seater. How, I'm not sure, because a Mitsubishi is quite a narrow car.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's a very strange, a very narrow vehicle.
Yeah, it's actually narrower than the Smart. So how you can actually fit 5 people in just by making it 7 inches longer, not too sure. You have to have a very, very thin, a thin person, sort of 2 inches wide by 7 inches deep,
and
I guess.
what have they done to the battery pack and everything like that,
Everything else is the same. So they've made it slightly longer.
That's a bit bizarre.
I think what they should have also done, I think, in this case, is address the interior trim, because they're also very good at that.
Yeah,
I saw the inside of one of their other models, and the seats were, very sharp, very nice. And just to do that to the iMove, that's really where it could be improved. I'm not sure about the big trapezoid thing on the front, the little metal bars in front and back.
It looks a bit weird, it must be said. I think that's not one of their best designs. I
believe they have actually updated the interior though, so it'd be interesting to see what they've actually done with that. To see how much better it is over the Mitsubishi. Unfortunately, we're not going to see it in Europe, and we're not going to see it in the States. But no doubt, one or two of them will escape and come over here. They normally do.
Now, I mean, do they do this under license from Mitsubishi, or do they just buy them and then convert them?
I have no idea.
I suspect they have permission of some kind, some sort of arrangement.
That's weird, and it's $34,000 as well.
It's only. I think it's only. I think I saw somewhere. I wrote a post on it, and I think I saw somewhere it said it was like $3,000 more than the iMe. And if Mitsubishi didn't want them to do anything with it, they would charge them full price, and so they wouldn't be able to make any profit on a mere $3,000 difference. So I just expect that Mitsubishi gave them a bit of a break, and charge them whatever, so they can make their margin as well.
Okay. I think I would rather have the Rolls-Royce looking, not the Rolls-Royce one, it was a Nissan Micra, which is called, it's not called the Micra in some parts of the world, it's called the Nissan March. So if you're going, what on earth is a Micra? It's a March. So Nissan March. It was called in different parts of the world. And strangely, the Micra was sold in Canada as a Micra until about 10 years ago, and then they stopped selling it. Because I know someone with a classic 80s Micra, but it never made its way to the States for some reason. I never understand why Canada gets some vehicles that America doesn't, but hey.
Different emission standards.
Absolutely.
Canada also got the diesel Smart, and it never came down to the States.
That's something someone was asking me about this week, actually, the Nissan, the Smart diesel, because that's what we've got. And saying, could I get one in America? And I said, no, you have to buy one in Canada and then ship it down, which I'm sure you can do. All right, finally, let's finish off. Elon Musk has said Tesla is more like Apple and Google than anybody else. I'm actually writing an article on this at the moment. Just finishing it off. Oh, I think that's complete and utter rubbish. I was going to say something involving the word B and S, but I'm too polite to do that live on air. No. Look, Microsoft and Google and Apple all do their business very differently to Tesla. First of all, Tesla is got the IPO coming up, and they're floating an IPO on the promise of the Tesla S. The whole IPO hinges on the success of a car they haven't even yet put into production. They're putting all their eggs in one basket. I'm not meaning to be a downer here. I'm just saying that they're not like Apple and Google and Microsoft. Sorry, not like Apple and Google. That's Elon Musk didn't say like Microsoft. They're not like those two companies. Apple develop devices for long periods of time and keep it quiet. And they produce long plans of what they're going to do. An illustration and point is when Steve Jobs bought out the Intel chipset for the Macintosh, moved over from PowerPC to Intel. They'd been working on Intel-based versions of the operating system since the early days of OS X, which was kind of 5 or 6 years in the past when they announced, we're switching over our processor technology. They've got stuff in testing that's in there for years and years and years. Tesla doesn't strike me as being a company that does that.
It's a young company.
It is a young company.
They have a core product. They just have their technology. They have a handful of 15 patents already granted to them. They have 90 some pending. Even Macintosh and Google, when they started out, they had their one initial product, and it took them a few years to ramp up to expand to where they are now. That's true. And absolutely, and the ramp up is I think he wanted to make the comparison in that, let's say, Google sort of small and blossom quickly. Where now he mentioned that the Roadster is selling a few hundred vehicles a year. They want the S to similarly explode to 20,000 models a year. That's it's quite a steep ramp up.
It is, and it's only going to be
personally-
successful if they can get the funding.
If you, I think Tesla
And that
now is
depends
a
on
bit
the
more
sales.
like Apple was in the very early days.
Right. Backyard.
I-
Are we talking the backyard days?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you look at, Apple launched the Apple One back in 1975. They launched the Apple II in 1977, and that was then there was about 7 years before they came up with anything else. I mean, the Apple II was still selling in 1993. It was a very good machine, but it took them a long time to ramp up and come up with something, to get to the next stage. And it was a small company, and it really struggled until it went through some really tough financial times up until about 2000, and that's when the iPod came on, and suddenly the whole world changed for them. So they've been working. They spent a long time developing things, but I think you could probably say that Tesla's like Apple was in the early 1980s,
Right.
perhaps.
Yeah.
There are some very good, strong parallels there. To get to the same sort of level of maturity and product strength and depth that Apple have got is going to take decades. It's going to take Tesla another 10 to 15 years of system development, vehicle development, and everything else before they can, they can be a real big player in the market, if they ever will be.
I think you're right. I mean, yeah, okay, they're like an early Apple or an early Google, but I think at the same time, it seems kind of a bit of an arrogant assumption to make. But then that's Elon Musk. I'm sure he won't mind me calling him.
He's got big dreams. He's got big dreams, and why not? I mean, this whole industry is being built on people with big dreams. I mean, I've been talking in this last week alone about.
Go on.
I've been talking this last week alone to people, to investors who invest and have invested 7-figure sums into electric vehicle companies, huge amounts of money, and prepared to do the same again and again because this is something they believe in. And it's either because they believe in it because they think that there's a huge market and a great opportunity to literally take the whole of the automotive market by the scruff of the neck and transform it, or they're doing it simply because they believe that this is right for their for the future of the planet. They want something which is better for their children.
I think companies like Tesla do have a really important role to play. I suppose I'm a little jaded by the wave after wave after wave of the Zaps and the Zebras, the Zap Zebra, and what was the other company? Phoenix Automotive, and all those other companies that have come and gone, or maybe are still around, but are still saying one day we're going to be millionaires. And at the moment, Tesla is on the border between being one of those companies that say one day we're going to be millionaires. They make a fantastic product, don't get me wrong. Their Tesla Roadster is awesome. Absolutely awesome. There is no other word for it. But an awesome vehicle does not make a successful business. Doesn't matter how good you are at making that vehicle. You've got to have a really sustainable business model on it. And right now, personally, I don't see that sustainable business model. And it's a really tough sphere, really tough place to break in. If you've got the money and people who are investing in Tesla, there are going to be some people who are going to make some big bucks out of this. I'm not going to be investing, partly because I don't have any money to invest, and secondly because I don't think it's fair for someone who covers electric vehicles to invest in them. Dominick's nodding his head. Do you agree?
That's kind of my point on that too. I would like, because I like the company and I like the product, and they've made some mistakes along the way, but I think they've learned a lot from them. Yeah, and I would love to have just frame it on my wall, like a stock certificate, but because I do cover it and stuff, I feel kind of funny about,
I am certainly in the pack of, I'm a journalist in the field of electric vehicles, therefore I cannot invest in electric vehicles, and I have to hold my hand up and say, no, I'm just not going to do it. I'll buy a Leaf, or I'll buy, I'll go out and buy an electric car with my own money. But it doesn't mean that I'm being a shareholder in a company is very different to being an owner of a vehicle. I think if you're a shareholder in a company,
Sure.
you just have to disclose that when you can't be a journalist within it. I mean, I know that in the computing world, exactly the same thing. There are some journalists who are also shareholders, and you can see that they are tainted by that, and it's a really difficult place to be. I wish Tesla all the best, and I really do hope that they make good on this IPO. Of interesting note is that the IPO is now up to $178 million. It started off as 100, and then last week it was 150. Now it's being reported as 178. So by the time it actually happens, I'm estimating it will go up to about 200 mil.
That'd be about $50 by then.
I heard they were looking for at least 185 million out of it.
Yeah, exactly. It keeps going up, and that concerns me slightly. Also, this whole Model S is going to be a multi-platform. They're going to build a.
That's right.
The Model S is going to kind of give rise to a truck, and give rise to an SUV crossover, and give rise to a cabriolet,
And the next Roadster.
And the next Roadster. And again, fantastic. Show me.
Give it time.
I think people
I'm
will
a
be
Missourian
surprised.
at heart.
There was an article in the. Sorry.
I'm a Missourian at heart. Their state motto is they're called the Show Me State. Sorry, Dominic, you were going to say.
I look forward to that. There was an article, someone, I think it was a San Francisco Gate or Chronicle or San Francisco paper. The guy saw the sketches of the vehicles on that. Saw some sketches of the vehicles, and they're very, preliminary sketches. Nothing like the vehicles are really going to look like. And I do have some, after seeing what they've done with the S, which will also be slightly modified from what the production will be. I'm impressed with their designer, and I expect that there'll be some sharp. I really can't wait to see the concepts that they come up with.
Yeah,
the new stuff.
Yeah,
I think
to that.
Where it finally sits up is from someone who is interested in business and in investment and all of that. I think there are lots of investors who would actually say, look, you're asking me to invest a lot of money on some drawings, and the only vehicle that they absolutely have is the S. They have the S prototype.
It's more than drawings, though. They've had a rolling prototype of the S, which is
I'm saying the S. The S obviously is a prototype, but I'm saying these other vehicles that they're talking about at the moment.
Right.
Right. Again, and if you say, the drawings, the Model S is real. We've seen it. We have seen it. People have had a ride in it. I've got no doubt that Tesla will make the Model S if they get the money. But right now, that's just one vehicle. These other vehicles that they make.
People buy stocks for other.
That's true. That's true. People do buy stocks for long-term investment, and they buy them for other reasons.
Or even for. Well, people buy them for different reasons, and I think the stock, from what I can tell, it's likely to shoot up in the early days. Very not too long, and I think it'll settle down. It maybe even worry people the depths that it sinks to. But I think if the people who buy it understand the longer term, then they'll do fine. If a lot of people are just doing speculation that's short, grab and run, kind of try to grab some profit off that.
It's going to take 10 years, 15 years at least before it's doing anything. I think 30 years is the long-term picture. I think if you're investing in Tesla, it's going to be at least 2040 before you get any huge investment.
I disagree with that.
Would you say less than that?
I think it's. Oh yeah, I think there's going to be. They've got to invest a lot of money. Absolutely, the Model S isn't going to be created on a small amount of money, but they've got a lot of money coming into the company now. They are growing that business. They're getting the investment in, and the amount of the figures aren't small. And based on the figures they're getting in, they should be able to produce the Model S. And once they've got the floor plan for the Model S sorted out, that is one of the biggest expenses
that's true.
that you're going to have. I mean, when Volkswagen, for instance, build a floor plan, they don't build a floor plan for one model. They'll take it they'll take the Golf and they'll make it into an Audi, they'll make it into a Skoda, they'll make it into a Seat, they'll make it into 2 or 3 different models on Volkswagen as well. And so you'll have one platform on 8 or 9 different vehicles.
True,
and
Mike.
the reason for that, it costs so much money to get that platform right.
That's true.
And the additional incremental cost for putting out a new model, still not small, but it's at least manageable, it's at least controllable. So what they're doing, it makes absolutely perfect sense. They're taking one model and they're saying, right, that floor plan is going to be used for our next generation of vehicles. Not just one, but 3, 4, 5, however many. And quite conceivably, they'll have the same floor plan or an updated version for the next generation as well. So we're talking of a model plan, not just for the next 8 years, but for the next 15, 16 years, based on on the technology they're developing now for the Model S.
You're winning me round, Mike. You are winning me round.
So
I'm being a little bit.
So how many shares can I put you down for then, Nikki? Sorry, I'm not selling shares, honest, promise.
No, not going to have any. I would love some shares in Tesla. I mean, I said that at the beginning. I would love some shares. I'd love a Tesla, quite frankly, but it's not going to happen. And I'm not going to buy shares. I'm rooting for Tesla. I really am rooting for Tesla. But I've seen some of the big car companies really struggle to bring electric vehicles to market. And it's a big difference for Tesla to do it because they are a startup company. They don't have any of the baggage of the big car companies. They don't have the same boardroom structure. I just hope they can do it. And at the moment, it seems like they're running on a very, very tight budget to produce an awful lot.
I don't know if I've seen any majors really wholeheartedly commit to the electric car project, and there's been no follow through at all. GM is almost as close as they've come with it. Everyone knows what happened to the EV1.
Yeah.
Ford is farming out their work. Chrysler had that. They trotted out a pile of electric cars. Look what we got, and it seemed like bait for bailout money. They scrapped the whole thing.
Yeah.
I haven't really seen a lot of true effort.
Of all of the startups, Tesla is the one that will win it. I mean, that's obvious. If someone said to me, you've got a choice between Tesla or Coda or Aptera,
that's true.
I would just have to go for Tesla. But there we are. Anyway, so we'll find out next week, I'm sure. The IPO will have happened by next week, hopefully. They're still not sure, but they're estimating it will happen for next week. Domenick, thank you very much for joining us today. Where can people find out more about you?
Thank you very much for having me.
Where can people find out more about you?
I'm at Autoblog Green most days. That's just about my where I am on the internet. That's the only site that I write for.
And safe driving.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us. You have to come back at some point in the future. Mike,
yeah, definitely. That's
just about it for us today, isn't it? Feedback is going to be feedback at transportevolved.com. And show suggestions, ideas, shut up talking about the Tesla, stop bashing the Tesla, anything like that, let me know. And we will be back next week. We will be back on Thursday at the usual time of 4 p.m. British summertime. That's 8 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time or 11 a.m. East Coast Eastern Daylight Time. If you're somewhere else in the world, you'll just have to figure it out for yourself. 5 p.m. Central European Time. Does that sound about right?
It's about that.
The butt crack of dawn if you're in Australia or New Zealand. I think it's something like 2 a.m. if you're in Australia, and I think 4 a.m. if you're in New Zealand.
Yeah, we don't get too many listeners in from New Zealand. It has to be
not
said.
On the live show, but we do on the podcast. No. Remember, please tell your friends, families, co-workers, and everything else about this all. And that's just about it. My name is Nikki Gordon-Bloomfield.
And I'm Mike Boxwell.
And this has been Transport Evolved. And until next time, remember to drive green. Take care, folks. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.